Hi guys, Carthenian here, and welcome back to our Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 Learn to Fly series. In this video, we'll be going over straight and level flight and some basic fundamentals for controlling the airplane. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and click on Ready to Fly and we'll get started. And let me reset my view and I'll go ahead and lock in my track IR. And the very first thing we're going to want to do, even before we engage the AI co-pilot, is we want to hover over this calibration knob and hit the B key, and that will calibrate the altimeter to where we want it. And then I'm going to engage the co-pilot so we can close windows, set up the sim and chat and stuff. So yeah, I had to engage the, or I had to hit the B key over that altimeter to set the altimeter to the local barometric pressure, as when you start a flight airborne like this, the sim just leaves it at 29902. And you have to do that before you engage the AI pilot, because if you wait till after, you can't control anything and it just will ignore your input. So I'm going to close these windows. Okay, and once again, this video is part of a larger series, so if you've missed some of the previous videos in the series, you want to go ahead and check them out. I even did a little primer video on how to set up the sim for what we want to accomplish and the route we'll be taking, or at least I'll be taking, as I learn to fly the Cessna 152 here. But today we're going to be going over straight and level flight, and if you've ever known anybody that's been a pilot or have gone up with somebody that owns a plane, they probably had you take over the controls a little bit and see if you could fly the plane straight and level. But it's easy to tell we're in straight and level flight. We could just look out the window, right? I mean, here we can see it's pretty obvious the horizon is level with the nose here, and if I look to my right and left, I see the wings are level with the horizon, and looking down, I can see the houses are not getting bigger or smaller, so we're not gaining or losing altitude. And you'll hear in a lot of lessons, if you go on YouTube or just check out aviation videos, they'll talk about what's called a sight picture, especially in VFR flying, where we're primarily looking at the window. And a sight picture is simply a freeze frame of what the outside world looks like when we're performing a maneuver correctly inside the airplane. So we now have our sight picture for straight and level flight. Like I said, we can see the horizon is level, we're not gaining or losing altitude. So this is our sight picture that we'll refer to in our minds when we need to return to straight and level flight. There are a couple instruments that can help us maintain straight and level flight. And we'll start with this altimeter here, which I covered on how to read in a previous video. But you can see we're at 5,500 feet, and we'll kind of use this hundreds hand as our speedometer. So what we want to do, so to fly straight and level, we'll note our heading that we're on is about 180, a little bit more than that, but 181 maybe. But we'll pick a point of visual reference outside of the windscreen here to fly to. Here's this field here, I can use that, but we'll just kind of want to fly towards a given point. And as we're flying, and that'll help us maintain our heading, and as we're flying, we just kind of want to glance down at this altimeter and make sure that the hundreds hand isn't moving. If it starts moving clockwise, we can push the yoke in to descend a little bit, and counterclockwise we'll pull the yoke back to climb a little bit to make sure that we stay at 5,500 feet. So we're primarily just looking out the window and staring at a point, and then checking our altimeter every now and then to see if we're still on that point. And then we could also, or we're still at our desired altitude, and we can also look down here at our heading and check to see that we're maintaining a good heading. We could also use this VSI. This shows our rate of climb, 500, 1,000 feet, or rate of descent, 500, 1,000 feet. But the problem with this guy is he's real sensitive and he lags behind what the airplane's actually doing. So if we focus in on that, we'll wind up chasing the needle. So we kind of want to not look at that and just focus on the altimeter and what's outside the window. And we can glance at the VSI every now and then to see what we're trending towards. But this is going to be what we're going to be looking at, this guy, and then we're going to be checking out our heading indicator to make sure we're still on heading. Another thing we want to do is make sure we're maintaining coordinated flight. In other words, we're not inadvertently side slipping off to our right or to our left. And to do that, we've got the turn coordinator down here, and you'll see inside this turn coordinator There's the airplane that's showing the wings are level, but we're focused on this ball in the tube here, and that ball is literally just inside of a tube, and it's pushed on by gravity, and that's called the inclinometer, and that lets us know that we're in coordinated flight when that ball is in the center of the tube. If the ball were moved to the right or to the left, we would want to apply rudder in that direction to recenter the ball, and we'll see that in a minute. There are other instruments which can help us determine whether we're in straight and level flight if we fly into the clouds. For one thing, you can see that the airspeed is being maintained relatively constantly. It's not really fluctuating up and down. If it were really windy or gusty out, you'd see this needle kind of moving around, but it should, remain pretty constant in straight and level flight. And the VSI we kind of went over, but our cheat sheet is obviously this: if we fly into a cloud, we want to go on the artificial horizon here, and you can see it's also known as the attitude indicator, because technically the artificial horizon only applies to the ball, this ball here inside of the gauge, but that's the part that we're concerned about because it has the blue representing the sky and the brown representing the ground. And you'll see the co-pilot here is just making we're banked into a left-hand turn a little bit as the co-pilot is just making a small correction, but in straight and level flight, this orange airplane's wings here should remain level with the horizon. So we're going to turn off the AI co-pilot and we're going to see if we can maintain straight and level flight. So now we'll note the heading that we're on. Looks like he's trying to maintain a heading of 180. So we'll note that and we'll kind of pick up a point to fly to. How about we just keep this field right here in the nose? And then we'll, as I mentioned, I'll have him maintain the radio comms because I don't want to deal with that. But we'll glance down at this altimeter every now and then to make sure we're maintaining straight and level flight and maintaining our altitude. So this is really all I'm doing. Now you'll notice that the plane has a little bit of a left bank tendency. So if we glance down at our turn coordinator here, that ball is moving slightly off to the right, so we want a little bit of right rudder, and that'll help kind of alleviate that bank tendency somewhat. And again, you always step on the side that the ball is moving towards. So if I give it a lot of right rudder, you'll actually see it move off to the left because it's telling us we've got too much right rudder, and we'll have to alleviate some right rudder pressure or even give it some left rudder. But we always want to keep that ball right in the center of the tube. Let me get us back to where we're supposed to be. And again, keeping our eye on this altimeter, treating it like a speedometer, almost like you're driving a car, right? You're just looking out the window, glancing at the instruments, and just trying to stay where you are, basically stay on course. And that's really, that's all there is to it. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and ciao. No, not quite. We're going to go over a few things. A few more things. I'll engage the AI pilot here and we'll talk some more. So we went over this is the 6-pack, the 6 main instruments that we'll be using in all of our flying. Well, now I would propose a question: what would happen if we were to grab on the yoke and just start pulling back? And the answer to that is, well, for one, when we pull back on the yoke, it pushes the nose up, or pulls the nose up. And that will put us into a climb. So we'll see this VSI meter start to rise, and then we'll also see the altimeter start to rotate in a clockwise direction. The other thing we'll notice is this airspeed will start to decrease. The reason why the airspeed will start to decrease is because it's just like a car. If you start going uphill and you don't adjust the power, you're going to start slowing down. So we'll go ahead and try that out now. Let me turn these guys off. And then you see with the same power setting, I'm just going to pull up a little bit. And the co-pilot will handle the comms. And as we can see, we're in a climb. This guy's moving clockwise, and look what's happening to our airspeed. It's bleeding off, right? We're slowing down to 80. And the opposite will hold true if I go into a dive. We're descending, and this guy's rotating counterclockwise, or anti-clockwise, if you will. And our speed is increasing. So let's give ourselves a hypothetical situation. I lack my track IR, so my head isn't bobbing all over the place. Let's give ourselves a hypothetical situation. What if our throttle got jammed and we needed to decrease our speed. Well, as you saw, I can simply pull up and our speed goes down, right? So if I was in some sort of dire situation and I need to slow down, but my throttle was jammed, I could simply pull back. So let's say you need to get back down to 80 knots here. It's a good number. It's easy to see on the airspeed indicator. So I could just start pulling back. And I'm not going to worry about the heading here. Just pulling back, and I'm going to maintain 80 knots with just my pitch. So we could see here that we could use our pitch to control our airspeed. But one thing you'll notice is I have to keep pulling back on the yoke, because if I let go, the airplane wants to push the nose back down. And so if I have to continuously pull back like that, my arms are going to get really tired. So I need to alleviate that force. In the real aircraft, there would actually be a force pushing the yoke out against you, and you have to use your muscles to kind of hold the yoke back. And so we need a way to alleviate that force so we don't get fatigued. And the way to do that is through this trim wheel down here. And we use the trim wheel to alleviate the force that we need to adjust the yoke where we want it. So if I just, I'll lock my track IR in here. In the sim, the trim will give the plane a more nose up or nose down tendency. And the same holds true in the real world. So if I just start adjusting this trim, let me move my view back up. If I just start rolling this thing down, look at that, the plane just wants to go right up. And the opposite would be true if I were to just start rolling it up, the plane would have a more nose down tendency. So what I can do is if I wanted to maintain that 80 knots with using the pitch, I can pull back on the yoke and then use that elevator trim to alleviate the pressure, which I'll do so now. Now I've got the trim mapped to my yoke, so you won't be able to see it. You won't be able to actually see what I'm doing, but I'm pulling back on the yoke now because you can see if I let go, it wants to go right back down. But now I'm going to roll that trim wheel down. I'm going to apply a little bit of nose up trim here. And then I could let go of the yoke more and see it wants to bounce back down. And I just kind of want to fine tune it so I can let go of the yoke and load. The airplane now is flying at 80 knots. It's got this nose up attitude, but it's flying at 80 knots without me having to strain my muscles. And the same thing happens if I were to push the airplane down. And let's say I want to get back to that 100 knots. I'll decrease the pitch to increase the airspeed. And there's about 100 knots, so I'm going to trim down, add nose down trim, add nose down trim, add nose down trim. And I'm a little fast there, but more or less at 100. Let's let it come back up a little bit. And there we go. I'm about at 100 knots. Well, I'm a little bit faster than 100 knots, but you get the idea. So we can conclude a couple things from this, right? We can conclude, based on everything that we've done, that we could use our pitch to control our airspeed, and the trim then, we use the trim to alleviate pressure we need to apply to the yoke, but what is the trim really doing? It's selecting the speed that the aircraft wants to fly at. Because I was flying at around 100 knots, and then I pitched the airplane up, slowed it down to 80 knots, and I re-trimmed for 80 knots. So I told the plane, I want to fly at 80 knots from now on. And vice versa when we went back to 100 knots. With that being said then, can you guess what a power change would do? So if I were to pull the power back at this point, what do you think would happen? If I were to just grab the throttle and pull it back, what would happen? The airplane would start slowing down, so our airspeed would start decreasing. But we have it trimmed for 100 knots. I've actually got the co-pilot on now, so I don't know what he's doing, but I'm guessing he's got it trimmed for about 100 knots. So it's slowing down, but it wants to fly at 100 knots. The only way it can get back to 100 knots is to pitch the nose down, right? And we'll descend. And that's the key, so let's try it. So I'm just gonna yank the power all the way back to idle. And this is a big change, so it may fluctuate around 100 knots, right? It might need our help to maintain 100 knots, but there you can see it slow down. It's trying to catch back up. The only way it could do that is by pitching the nose down. And now you can see it's flying a little bit faster than 100 knots because it'll oscillate around that 100 knots because we made such a big power change. But if we were to help it, we can get it to fly 100 knots. But the airplane always wants to fly at 100 knots. And look what happens to our altitude. We're descending, right? So if I increase the power now, we're going to start speeding up. The only way the aircraft can get back to 100 knots is to pitch the nose up and start climbing. And it's going to be a big climb again. I'll make little pitch adjustments to see if we can help this be around 100 knots, but there we go. So we've learned that our pitch controls our airspeed, our power controls our altitude, and the trim selects the speed that we want to fly at. So now what if we wanted to change the speed that we're flying in straight and level flight? And I'll let him get back to, he should be flying at 5,500 feet. I'm not sure where he's, oh yeah, we're at 4,500. Actually, you know what? Since we're doing this, let's see if we can get back to 5,500 feet. So now the airplane's climbing because we have it in a, now he was pulling back in the yoke. You see that? It's probably still trimmed for 100 knots. But let me see. Okay. Let's see if I can get it climbing again. And then we'll let it climb to 5,500 feet. And then we'll level off and see if we can maintain straight and level flight. Now, what heading are we on now? We're a little bit to the left of 180, so let me get us back over to the right. Let's climb back up and see if we can fly at 5,500 feet straight and level for a little bit. So again, now you'll notice I'm trimmed for a little bit faster than 100 knots. I'm going to apply a little bit nose up trim, and that'll get us back to climbing. And this is kind of a sloppy way of climbing, but we're just doing this for demonstration purposes as to what we learned. Because I'm letting it float up and down. Our passengers would probably get seasick if we let it do this and we were carrying passengers. I'll tell you what, we'll do 5,100 feet, so we're not here forever. But let's see if we could fly straight and level at 5,100 feet now. So now let's set the power down to 2,400 RPM. And now we'll just try to fly straight and level at 5,100 feet. So I'll make little changes in pitch and trim it out so it wants to fly at 5,100 feet all day long. And we're not going to worry about the airspeed here. The airspeed's going to do what the airspeed's going to do based on the power we have set. That, I find that heading indicator awfully hard to read, by the way. I am looking into getting a hardware heading indicator that goes on my desk, especially in this airplane because we don't have a heading bug. The bigger airplanes will have a heading bug that you could, a little marker you could set on the bezel. That makes it easier to see where you want to fly. But I think that any peripheral that gets my eyes looking out the computer monitor, if you will, it keeps my eyes focused out the computer monitor, and I could just glance down at my desk and see what heading I'm flying. Well, I'm all for that. So here we're doing that thing where we're driving the airplane like a car now, right? We're just looking outside, trying to fly towards our ground reference points, which we see here. We can see our sight picture matches up with what we know is straight and level flight, and we're just glancing at that altimeter to make sure that we're still flying straight and level. So that's how basically we can fly the airplane. So I just did that as a demonstration. But now, what if we wanted to change the speed that we're flying at? What would we do? Well, even though pitch controls our airspeed and power controls our altitude, if we want to slow down, we've got to pull the power back. We know that, right? And those rules still apply. It's just we're going to be constantly retrimming the airplane all the way down to 80 knots in straight and level flight. So if I pull the power back, the plane is going to want to pitch the nose down and descend. And I'm going to fight that by pulling the yoke back and then using the trim to alleviate the pressure to try to get down to our new airspeed. So let's do that. Let's slow down to 80 knots. So I'll pull the power back, and now the nose is going to want to come down. So I'm going to pull it up. Again, remember that sight picture. Try to remember how much horizon was in front of the nose. And there we're slowing down, and I'm retrimming. I'm keep adding in nose up trim. I'm actually getting a little high, so I do want it to come down a little bit. You can see I'm over 5,200 now. Let's try to maintain our altitude within 200 feet for this first video. Because again, I'm learning with you guys, so I'm not going to be perfect here by any stretch of imagination. So let's pull the power back some more. Again, we could look at that VSI to see what we're trending towards. We're trending towards a descent, which is fine because I'm a little high. But I'm still a little bit faster than 80 knots, so I'll add some nose up trim. Again, keep an eye on our heading, make sure we go straight. And I need to pull back the power even more. This thing just wants to go today, man. Well, you get the idea. Yeah, so now I'm at 80 knots and 5,100 feet. Likewise, if I wanted to return to 100 knots, we'll just jam the throttle forward. Not jam it, right? Smoothly increase the power. It's only a sim, though, so we can get away with stuff like that. And then now the nose is gonna want to come up. I need to apply nose down trim. I need to push the yoke forward and apply nose down trim to take the pressure off. And you can see I'm almost already back up to 100 knots. And I'll have to readjust that power so we don't shoot past it. But so push the yoke in, use the trim to alleviate the pressure, and trim is for the new airspeed. And we never want to, so now I'm there, so I can fly straight and level. And I'm getting a little bit off to the left there, so let's aim for this field off in the distance here. I'm getting a little high. There's a lot of little adjustments you're gonna have to make, but that's how it goes. And we're more or less flying straight and level now. And one thing you'll want to do too is you never want to fly the airplane with the trim. So in other words, apply pressure forwards or backwards on the yoke first, and then use the trim to alleviate the forces. So I'm a little high, so I'm going to push the yoke down in and apply some nose down trim to alleviate the force. And I'm probably going to get fast then, right? So now I need to slow up. So it's just a matter of, a lot of this is just learning the airplane and making those little adjustments and returning to, and just learning how to fine tune it to fly the way you want it. And then once you get it there, it practically flies itself, at least the Cessnas do. And I'm still about 50 feet high, but you get the idea. So that's pretty much all there is to it. We learned, and I turned the co-pilot on, so now he's going to do his own thing. We learned he's got to get us back up to 5,500 feet. But so we went over how to fly straight and level. We went over what a sight picture is, what the sight picture for straight and level flight looks like, And we talked about how we pick a ground reference point, fly towards it to maintain our heading, and then we kind of drive the airplane over there as if it were a car. We could check our instruments here, periodically glance down to make sure we're holding our altitude. The hundreds hand shouldn't move. We're still holding our heading, and we're in coordinated flight. We learned that pitch controls our airspeed, power controls our altitude, and the elevator trim selects the speed that the plane wants to fly at. And we also learned that to change our speed in straight and level flight, to speed up, we increase power, accelerate to our new speed, and then trim for that speed. To slow down, we would decrease power, and pull the yoke back to maintain our altitude and trim for that slower speed. In the next lesson, we'll be going over turns and banking and all that fun stuff. If you haven't subscribed to this series and you want to know when these videos drop, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell, because I am doing this part-time. I'm just getting started, and these videos will be coming out very sporadically. So if you want to be notified when the next video comes out, be sure to subscribe and to my channel and hit that notification bell. And if you like this video, if you're just getting started and you found it helpful, or you just thought it was a good watch or something, be sure to hit the like button to let me know that you like it, and that lets me know that people like what I'm doing and I should keep doing it. So until then, I hope to see you in the turns video, and I hope you have fun flying around in the sim, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.